Okay, so what we did was we went and created a new project, an empty C++ project. We clicked on next, and then we input some things in here. So we don't need to do that because we've already created that. So to get your project up and running, we need to go into source files, and you'll see there's nothing there. So we need to add a file, and you do that by right-clicking and choosing Add and New Item. So let me do that for you again. We're in the solution over here. Make sure that you see it. If you go into View, you can see all the things that you need to have. If something's missing, then you can get it from there. So we have the Solution Explorer here. So you're going to create a new source file. So I'm just right-clicking on it and choosing New Item. Now, very important, forget about class and forget about header file. We'll be using them later on when we get into classes, but for now you're going to click on C++ file, and you make sure that you name it something that makes sense. So I'm just going to call it Intro. And I'm going to click on Add. So now we have a program that does absolutely nothing. How exciting is that? So there are several things that you need to start every program with. And the first one is called include. And notice this is all lower cases. Now, notice as I type, it's going to anticipate what I am, the code hints. So I don't want to highlight it. I can just click the tab key, and that will add it. And the next thing, we need a bracket, and we need something called IOStream. So there's IOStream. Notice it's the only thing there, so I can hit the tab key. What that does is allow you to do certain operations that you couldn't do, like input, output, which we're going to actually do tonight. And then we don't really need it right now unless we're going to manipulate strings, but this is always a good thing to include. Of course, spelling is something that you need to do properly. Now, don't confuse string H. We need to do string. And then using namespace and std, and I'll explain that for. Now notice this has a semicolon in it. What this means is we're going to use things in the standard library that we don't want to have to every time use it type in std : and I can show you that in a minute. So for now, we're just going to just take my word for it. That will make your life easier. You'll learn what namespace is. It's just a container for a bunch of things that you can do. So now we have to create the main program. Every C++ program, every one needs to begin like this. So we're typing int and main, notice all lowercase. And then we're doing, as soon as you hit in the left parenthesis, then it's going to create a right one. Then we need a bracket. And boom. So then we need two more statements. First one is system pause. And the next one is return. If we try to run this program without a return statement, it's going to complain. So let me explain what we have in here. The main is what is a function. That is the starting place for all C++ programs. Just like if you know Java, you have to create a main class in there or whatever you actually call the class, which is the name of the Java program. So now we have a program that does nothing. The system pause is going to say, press any key to continue. So let's see what that actually does. So I'm going to see if I have any errors, and I'm going to click on compile. Then I will show you a shortcut on how to do that. And if you have any errors in there, it'll tell you right now. And then we go to debug, and we're going to make sure we use start without debugging. And right now, the only thing it should do is put in press any key to continue. And it takes a bit of time to run, and that's all there is to it. So that's the actual pause command. So if I take out this return statement and to comment it out, you just put in the two little brackets there. When I compile it, it should give me a message saying no return statement. So if you get that, then you'll know what to look for. So it should fail, which it actually did not. Very shocking. Maybe it's something that they don't have built in, but it should give you an error. So let's put our mouse over here and see in here. So it's not actually doing anything. So let's try running it and see what happens. Actually, I'm not going to. I'm really not sure why it should give you an error saying that you don't have a return statement in there. But it might be strictly in the new version over here. But anyway, you always want to have a return statement. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a name and print out the name. So there's two things that we need. We need something called cout and cin. That means console out and console in. Just think of it as like a write and a print. So cout, and then we need what's called extraction in there. So that's two less than signs. And then I'm going to enter something that says, please enter your name. And notice I'm putting a space here. And then we're going to do cin, and we're going to get an error now. Name. Okay, now notice we're trying to use something that doesn't exist. So what we need to do here is say, hey, program, we want to use a variable called name. A variable is something whose data can change. So we just use it. It's a type string. So all these things are explained in there. We're going to be using integers and strings, characters, and either float or decimal in there. So, and you'll find them pretty easy. So we need to call it name, and we need to initialize it. Now, the program doesn't make you initialize it, but I do. And the reason being is you're prone to make a mistake if you don't initialize it. You may try to use something that doesn't exist. And yes, Visual Studio should warn you. However, you might not be using Visual Studio. You might be using Eclipse or some other C++ compiler, and it just might not. So now what it's going to do is say, let's get a name. And what good is it going to do if we don't print it? So we're just going to do cout and welcome and we need every statement has to begin with a semicolon. So now what I did here is I want to print out. I need these two less than signs. Then I'm going to print welcome, two less than signs, then in the variable name, this in here, and boom. Now I'll show you another way that you can do the same thing. And this is pretty much new. All right, come on, computer. And I'm going to replace this with a plus sign. You can now do that in Visual C++. So basically, it should print this out twice, but we're going to need to make a cosmetic change because everything's going to print out on the same line. So I'm going to try to compile it to see if there's any issues. So it succeeded. So now I'm going to run it. And remember, Control F5. Now we don't have to compile it. We can hit Control F5 and it will compile it first. So what is your name? And it says, welcome Richard to IT T301. Welcome, no spaces. So that's all cosmetic. So we need to fix that. So there's two ways that you can do it. I'll put in, and I always do it this way, NL. That's a special character that says go to the next line. Or you can do what's called an escape character. And that will be. Now you don't want to do this. So we're going to put in here. So let's go and do that. Now if you forget which way is which, then don't worry about it because what will happen? So you can look in here and let's see what happens. It's a constant character. So let's hit Control F5 and see what happens now. So let's put my name in. All right, boom. So if I guess wrong and I don't remember, now notice this is purple. Let me change it to this way. And what you're going to see, notice it's all the same color. What's going to happen is going to print this as a /n. So let's do that. So when you see some weird stuff in there, so let's try it again. And boom, notice that it put the /n in here. So let's go back to this. So now we're good. So what we've created here is a string variable. So let's create an integer variable. So the integer is just int, and we'll call it number. And we always want to initialize everything to 0. Now, if you guys have any questions, I'm not looking at the chat. Please just unmute your mic and say, I have a question, go in here. So now we've created something called number. But let me get rid of this right now, and let's see what happens. Okay. Now notice that we are not able to do that. It doesn't know what to do. This is not in here. So what you would have to do is type in std : to tell it where it belongs to. Well, I don't want to do that for every single thing. So that's why we're using the namespace standard. Okay. So that should take care of it. Now it does take a bit of time for the red lines to go away. So welcome, welcome in here. And then let's go cout. Enter a number. And notice I have a space here. And notice there's no end L. We want it all to be on the same thing. And then we'll put in cin. And if you forget which way the brackets go, just remember whatever way it is that the greater sign is, that's where the actual output or input is. So what we hit are now here in here. So let's go cout and let's put in number. And if the red lines don't go away, you have them reversed in here. So we're getting the number in here, and then we're going to print out your number is, I'm going to put in the plus sign and put number. Next thing we're going to do is go over, we lost her. I don't know what happened to Gwendolyn. But anyway, we have this here. So I'm going to run this right now. Control F5. So I'm entering my name. and I'm putting in a number. I'll put in 20, and whoop, invalid string position. So you have all kinds of things in there. String position, press any key in here. So that means we have something wrong. So let's go and see what we have here. And let's put in this here and see if we have an issue in here. So the problem is it worked here because this is a string and this is a string. But here we have a string and an integer. So that's why it should not work. So again, let's try this. Enter a number, we'll try 20. Boom, your number is 20. All right, so now we have a cosmetic issue. So we're just going to and we have that here. So again, we'll run it. And boom. So we're good. So now let's do the average of two numbers. And this is not going to work. So I'm going to show you a very common problem. So let's create a second number. And I'll call it number 2. So we have enter a number. And I will copy this. Enter another number. And this time we'll make it number 2. And I'm going to comment that out for right now. And see out. So let's create a floating point value and we'll call it average. We want to get the average of numbers. And the floating point number is the same as an integer, except that it can have decimal places in here. So let's go in here and calculate the average. So we got two numbers. So we need to get the total of the two numbers. So we're going to create another integer, which equals 0. And we're going to create the total equals, and all calculations by my requirements need to be inside of parentheses. And the reason is you'll make less mistakes doing that. So the number is just simply number plus number 2. And then the average is the total divided by 2. And then we'll put C out the average of number plus, and I'm putting 2 spaces in here so they're not all put together. A lot of stuff is all cosmetic stuff. Number 2. And then we want equals. Notice we're putting a space here. And then another space. And average. Okay, now we're going to get the wrong answer to this. Did I spell something wrong? Average, why? Oh, because I'm missing this here. Okay. So, yeah, it gets very annoying. It's constantly going to do it. All right, so why are we not seeing this going away? Expected an expression. So get used to these kind of issues in, oh, because we have plus, duh. Okay. So a lot of times you just type it in here. That's my Siri going away. All right. So now I'm going to run the program and let's see what happens. So again, get in here. So the first number is 2. The second number is 3. So average of invalid string position, okay, equals 2. So that means you have a cosmetic error in here. So again, we have the plus here. So these are things that when you get these errors, just go back and not worry about it. Just look and see, oh, I have a problem in here. And it gives you some information in here. So let's go again. So we want 2 and 3, and let's see what happens. Okay, the average of 2 equals 2. So I don't think I put the second number in. The average of 2. Okay, let's do some cosmetic stuff. So notice I changed things one at a time in here. So the average is number and number, boom. So let's run it again. All right, so now we have the average of 2 and 3 equals 2. So we have a cosmetic issue again, but we know that 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So we have a problem. And let me put this here again. The problem is we're trying to do integer division. So what's happening in here, this is 2 and number 5, this is a 5. So total is an integer. We're dividing an integer by an integer. So that is what the problem is. So what we need to do is we need to convert any one of them to, say, a float. So we can't do this in here because this is already a float. This is an integer, actually. I'm sorry. So we can convert this and just put in parentheses float. So what that means is we know that it's an integer, but convert it to a float before you do it. Now, you don't need the space there. So we're adding it, total is an integer, but here we're using it as a floating point variable. So let's see what happens now. I'm just going to put R. So we can do 2 and 3, and now it's 2.5. Okay, so that is a small thing. Let's put in a character. A character can only be one character, and we'll just call it my character. And we initialize it a little bit differently. A character gets initialized with a single quote and a space, whereas a string gets initialized as the null string. That's just the way it is. So now we're going to do cout, enter a character, and notice the extra space there, cin my char, and then I'll put in cout the character is now here, because it's a string, I could have used plus. So let's see if it lets us without giving us any issues. Okay, so here you don't want to do that because it's a constant So we're going to do this. This is what I was saying before. Always use the in here. We need the in here. And you could actually use plus. I'm just not a big fan of that for NL, but that's just my personal preference. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in everything in here. So let's start the program. R2 and 3. Enter a character, and I'm going to put G. Go. So I actually enter GO. So it says press any key to continue. So we have a problem in here. So let's try putting something in here, a regular character, and see what happens. And we're not, so enter a character, we're not seeing it. So that you need to go, that's called debugging in here. So, oh, now I see why we're using the plus sign. So that's why I need to highly emphasize only use the plus sign when it's all strings. Notice this is a character, it's not a string. So let's try it now. And I do these things so that when it happens to you, then you know how to fix it. So let's see what happens now. We do 2 and 3 again. We do C. And now the character's C. Now let's run it again. And I'm going to type in GO. Notice that it's only the G. Because what happens is it can only read one character. So let's go in here and get another character and let's see what happens. And let's see what happens. Now this is very common when it comes to integers. So let's run it and see what happens. So we're going to enter a character. We're going to type in GO. And it never stopped to ask us what the other character is. It automatically did it. So the reason is because we're only allowed to hit one character. As soon as you hit that one character, it's going to know that that's all you want. It's going to keep it in the keyboard buffer. And as soon as you get the C in, it looks to see if what's in the buffer, and that takes care of that. Same thing with integers. If I were to do input an integer, it will do that. So that is the quick and dirty thing. I will be making a more detailed version of this as well.